Welcome, everybody. We're going to give everybody a minute to get here. I know everybody's coming from whatever weird shape of school you're having. Either you're logging off or you're moving or you're doing a little bit of both. Thank you so much for taking your time today to be here with us. I know it's not easy to find spare hours nor give up any spare time whatsoever. So the idea that you're going to take an hour to talk about social justice and community engagement and how we work those two together is remarkable. So thank you for being here. I will give us 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll get started, and people can just catch up when they come in as needed. I turned off the waiting room, so should anybody need to log off and come right back in, it should be no problem whatsoever. Anyway, my name is Blake Cohn. I'm the Executive Director of the National Network of Schools in Partnership. And as I already said, I'm really happy to see all of you. Connecting with all of you on Zoom is the best part of my days for sure. I am here with Rebecca Drago from Rye Country Day School outside of New York City, and she is our expert today. Well, no pressure, but she's going to share with us her strategies and tactics around embedding social justice into your community engagement curriculum. She is the Director of Public Purpose at Rye Country Day School. So she has a unique role that some of you share, and others of you aspire to having the administrative support to have an entire position and department cut out to be around this work. I'm also here. Laura Day from Hockaday is here. She is an integral part of NNSP. And so the two of us will be moderating, and Rebecca will be sharing, and we'll do some breakouts. And should you have any questions, I know no one's a Zoom novice anymore, but put them in the chat, raise your hand, or speak out, but let's try to find good breaks in what Rebecca's saying to speak out. But if you put them in the chat, I'll be sure to make sure we address all the questions. Are there any other questions? The one last thing I should tell you is that we're recording, because I will put this up on our YouTube channel and then share it out with everybody who's registered when we're done. So just so you know that this is being recorded and will be shared with everybody in this space when we're finished. Okay, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me, everyone. The phrase you said about being a Zoom novice, remember when we were all Zoom novices? There's like real nostalgia for that time. But welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And yeah, the general structure of this will be, I have some ideas. I'm certainly not an expert, though I appreciate the sentiment. But I have some sort of tips and tricks that I've come up with as I've muddled through this work, which I think is like very much what it is, because it's sort of a figuring it out as we go. And then I want to do some brainstorming about what you all have done, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the room that have some great ideas and experience, and we can sort of work through that together as well. To start, I'm going to ask that people put into the chat, just because I want to sort of get to know you a little bit. This is my favorite new question. If you could do a TED Talk about anything that's not like your career focused, what would it be? So for example, I have a lot of relatively embarrassing TED Talks I could do, but one of them would be about the sociological implications of the Bachelor franchise. And reality, I'm like a big reality television person, for better, for probably worse. But anyway, I could talk about that for a long time, and sort of what the franchise has done in terms of race and gender and sexuality. No spoilers, don't worry, I'm not even caught up on this week's episode, so I got you. So anyway, if you could just put in the chat, what could you do a TED Talk about? Ooh, cooking as COVID therapy. Nice. Sociology of sports. That's a really good one. Colonial mentality embedded in my culture. How to rescue a puppy and not totally lose your mind. I could use that. I got a puppy recently. How to pick a book to read and keep your mind off everything else. Strategies to get a 16-year-old to do the dishes. Therapy of plants, excellent. Cooking an entire breakfast meal from start to finish. Mistakes of white people make in the struggle for racial justice, or Jedi level thrift shopping, both important topics. Intuitive relationship with yourself, entertaining toddlers. Humor as a source of comfort as seen through the lens of The Office, excellent. Nice, there are some good TED Talks. I would want to sign up for these. Implicit bias, excellent. So feel free to put yours in when it comes to you. I think it's just a good way to get to know each other a tiny little bit. And with that, I will sort of move into the presentation. Feel free to pause me at any point and ask a question or offer an idea or a critique or a thought or anything you might want. But as Blake shared, I am the Director of Public Purpose at Rye Country Day School. So it is a senior level administrative role, which is something that I'm just like it's just very lucky for me in terms of what I'm able to do and what I'm able to push. I've only been in the role I'm starting my 3rd year. Before that, I got my master's in social justice education. So my roots are really in how to do social justice dialogue work and how to create spaces where young people can learn about themselves and talk to each other about that in terms of social identity. So that's really my background. I was not really trained in service learning explicitly. I had done some work in service learning myself as a volunteer, but also in terms of writing and learning about it in grad school. But I would say that because of that, my lens is, again, really DEI focused. So that's a lot of what you'll hear come through today. And in a lot of ways, I see service learning as a vehicle to be able to do social justice work. To me, good service learning is rooted in DEI, and good DEI sort of becomes good service learning. It's DEI in action. That's what we say at our school pretty often. Cool, so I will share my screen and show you what I believe to be a very important photo of my dog. We will get there eventually once we load. There we go. Okay, so this is my dog Otis. He is a new puppy in my life, so I could use whoever suggested the puppy one. But anyway, that's a little bit about me in terms of what I do at school. Here's a little bit about me outside of school. Really, the dog is all that matters. And I think we're going to start with sort of a critique of service learning from a social justice mindset. So many of you might be familiar with Tania Mitchell. She writes a lot about this. I have some articles I can pass along after if you want, but she writes from the perspective of what critical service learning is. So this idea that service learning, when not done well, can actually be ultimately harmful in terms of relationships with community and sort of reiterating power dynamics. And so here's a quote that I can just read out from that article. It's called Traditional versus Critical Service Learning. Without the exercise of care and consciousness, drawing attention to root causes of social problems and involving students in actions and initiatives addressing root causes, service learning may have no impact beyond students' good feelings. In fact, a service learning experience that does not pay attention to those issues and concerns may involve students in the community in a way that perpetuates inequality and reinforces an us-them dichotomy. Further, such interpretations of service learning, ironically, serve to mobilize and bolster privileged students to participate in and embrace systems of privilege, preserve already unjust social structures, and may act to normalize and civilize the radical tendencies of our constituent communities, students, and ourselves. So that's a pretty bleak outlook of what service learning can be without a rooting in social justice, right? So the idea that it just reiterates power dynamics. I see this often in my school community around resume building for college and students really being told that they have to have a number of community service hours in order to get into college. We were able to do away with our community service hour requirement, which I think really helps this because then it allows students that are genuinely interested or still know that it helps their college resume, but it's not done in the same sort of rote way, right? So I think that is, in terms of structuring a program, getting rid of the hours requirement if you're able to is helpful. And then feel free to put any thoughts about this in the chat if you have read this before or or anything like that. So that is a general critique of service learning. I will use this. Like I sometimes have students read through this. If I'm engaging in, I have one summer project that's a really intensive one where students run their own programs, and it's like heavy on training. We have hours of seminars that the students go through. And at the beginning of it, I actually have them read this entire article and sort of pick it apart and use it as a framework. So that's one of my major sort of strategies is I actually have them read the critiques of service learning and go through that. And that obviously is age dependent. These are upper school students I'm working with, mostly sophomores and above. The next framework I'll show you that I've found really useful is ways to look at different models of service learning that are sort of varying levels of like socially just or not. So again, a lot of text at the beginning, but we'll open it up for more chatting later. So this is from an article called What Kind of Citizen? The Politics of Educating for Democracy. And I'm, to be honest, not even sure that educating for democracy is my goal, but the article has some really great language. So this talks about different kinds of citizens and the different ways we structure service learning programs and projects. What Westheimer and Kahn say is the personally responsible citizen acts responsibly in their community by, for example, picking up litter, giving blood, recycling, obeying laws, and staying out of debt. The personally responsible citizen contributes to food or clothing drives when asked and volunteers to help those less fortunate, and I think that's quite a term, whether in a soup kitchen or at a senior center. So I'm sure like I have programs that are designed this way that have been in existence for well before I got here. I think a lot of service learning do things that allow for like a personally responsible citizen, right? Sort of like showing up, doing the good deed, and kind of calling it a day, right? And I'm not saying that's inherently a terrible thing. It's just something to sort of notice. The next kind of citizen they talk about, the participatory citizen. Proponents of this vision emphasize preparing students to engage in collective community-based efforts. While their personally responsible citizen would contribute cans of food for the homeless, the participatory citizen might organize the food drive. In the traditional of de Tocqueville, proponents of participatory citizenship argue that civic participation transcends particular community problems or opportunities. It also develops relationships, common understandings, trust, and collective commitments. So more engaged, right? Taking the leadership role, sort of invested in creating programs that address a need. The next and sort of last citizen, which is the kind that I am always aiming for, is the justice-oriented citizen. So I will let you read this, and then if you could pull out a sentence or two or a phrase that you think is important and put that in the chat, just so it's not so much of my voice. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, feel free to put anything else in the chat. What I'm seeing is calls explicit attention to the matters of injustice and importance of pursuing social justice, asking why people are hungry and acting on that. Asking why is definitely a pattern. More likely to teach about social movements and how to affect systemic change. Prepare students to improve society. Not as big of an emphasis on charity, but about social movements, critical analysis, right? A big focus on why and what's going on. So for me, this article is something that I refer back to a lot when I'm training other teachers if they're running a service learning program. We have several that other teachers on campus are involved with. And I've found that sort of training them in what the critique of service learning is and what the different options are in itself just embeds a lens of social justice. Because then I think like when my third grade teacher who's running a project within her class that's sort of focused on a food drive, she has those conversations within her class, and she'll read books like like kids' books about poverty and food insecurity, rather than just say like, let's focus on making posters for collecting food. She'll do those conversations beforehand and have them in a real way and then make the post, right? So it's still aiming at getting the food drive to happen, right? The reality is we still need participatory citizens and responsible citizens. We need folks to show up to the food drive, we need folks to organize a food drive, and we need people to be asking why. So all three of these citizens, you could argue, are important. But I think when looking at like how to take a program and really embed a social justice mindset, it's really asking why and looking at the systems and the issues connected to everything. And we can talk a little bit about what that looks like in different age groups, because I think that's sort of the challenge. Okay, so a few things that I just in prepping for this just sort of came up with that I've talked about a little bit that have helped me at least. So in terms of my program structure, I have a very close relationship with our director of diversity and inclusion. He and I partner on everything. That happened very organically. We happen to really just like get along and are on the same page about a lot of stuff. But I think literally seeing us on campus together helps people associate the two programs. And we have a real genuine partnership. And this is new and exciting, but we actually are now starting what's called, it's a big title, but the Center for Community Engagement and Social Change is the name of this sort of like center we're building on campus, and we're each going to be a co-director of that. So both of our programs are still going to exist, but in the move that DEI is shifting from DEI work into community work, which is sort of happening at various independent schools, this will similarly kind of meld our programs in a structural way. So that I do find to be very helpful in lending like basis behind what we're doing. I am also a broken record about this. So shifting the terminology from service learning and volunteering to, I call it social impact work, activism, and social change. And I think just including all of those as part of the lingo is really helpful in people widening what they see. So when our students had like the climate walkout a couple of years ago, I helped that student run that. And I thought it was like great I was glad she sort of picked me as her adult. But people seeing that service learning is more than just sort of like showing up and doing the food drive thing. Activism is part of it, right? Social movement, social change. Constantly talking about systems, asking students why. So regardless of what program they're involved in, I run a number of enrichment-based tutoring programs that are not, I think they're harder to reform in this way in terms of social justice, but I've been working on that really heavily. And what I do beforehand is with the student tutors who are all upper school students, as part of the training, I say to them, like, why are we doing this? What is going on with this? How come students in the town over are attending our program and we are teaching our program? And we have a real conversation about educational access. Sometimes it gets into tax codes and how money goes into different public school systems and why, and what the impact is. We talk about power dynamics. We do self-reflection work. I talk openly about what it means to be a white woman doing this work, which is the vast majority of people doing service learning tend to be white women. Naming that, talking about the challenges with that, right? Again, I just put it on the table during the training, obviously very scaffolded, but it's there again. So understanding of the self, depending on the amount of training time I have with the students, we will go through some sort of like identity molecule and thinking about how that might relate to power in the situation. Always pushing relationships within what we do, so that's the focus. We're not doing the one-off model as much. We're doing like long-term events and programming. And then lastly, the explicit connection to social problems. So even with like a cleanup day at a nature center, we'll say like, what's up with this? Why is this happening? Let's talk a little bit about people's relationship to the planet or climate change, or right, getting them to know that these things are not apolitical. They're all connected to bigger issues. And that can be done with really any age. A couple more things, and this I think helps with sort of the age piece, and then we're going to get into the brainstormy space. Leveraging those frameworks, so I can pass out those 2 articles if they're helpful, but having students read through them. With younger students, what I'll often do is I was taught as a young activist, I was taught this story once a long time ago, and then I adapted it for 6th graders, because the story was essentially, and I'll share the first one, and then I'll share the adapted one. But I was in an activist training when I was in college, and someone said, okay, so you're walking down the street and you're by this river, and you see, it's awful. It's an awful like image, but you see a bag of dead puppies in the river. And you're like, what is going on? What do you do? And then you ask the group of students and they say, you go get the puppies. You go get, you get them out of the river. And then you say, okay, then you keep walking down the river and you see another bag of puppies. What do you do? And you go get the puppies. And you keep asking until somebody says, you have to go upstream and figure out where the puppies are coming from. And the way I've adapted that to a less dark, disturbing image is I talk about a beach cleanup. And I say, so let's say we all go to the beach and there's a bunch of litter on the beach and we like, what should we do? And then 5th graders will say, we clean it up. And I say, great, that's amazing. You did such good work. I'm so grateful that you were all here, but I'm gonna go back next week and what might the beach look like? And they say, it probably has more litter on it. You're like, yeah, so what do we do? And they might say, you clean it up again, but you do that until they get to the point where you say, well, how do we prevent the litter from being there? And then ask them to problem solve. And they'll come up with things like, are there trash cans around? Are there signs? Are there laws built to prevent littering? Can we go to the local restaurants and ask for them to use different materials in their takeout, right? Things like that. So getting them to work through that and then apply those ideas to whatever project they're working on. Advocacy and education over the end goals. So this is a big one with middle school. We do a lot of projects in my middle school that they want to do fundraising and drives. And again, those are great. But I think especially now in COVID times, I know we're trying to be really sensitive to like not doing fundraising and asking folks for money where they can. I think some schools are sort of banning that entirely, which makes sense. So we've built a project that really hinges on advocacy. And I do a whole lesson on like, why does advocacy matter? And talk them through like you can donate $300 to an organization. That's huge and not to be dismissed, but that money gets used up and what happens after that, right? But if you teach someone about the issue, if you teach someone about the organization you're partnering with, and they become passionate about it and sort of carry it out throughout their life, then the impact is longer and more sustainable. And then we do really fun advocacy projects around making videos and posters and teaching each other and that sort of thing. And then it takes time, which is a scarce resource for a lot of us, but really trying to carve out time for trainings and the pre-conversations. And then it's not shiny. And that's been a personal challenge I have experienced at a school that likes shiny, which I'm sure folks can relate to. But a lot of what I do is like not Instagrammable for our school Instagram. It's the stuff that happened. Like I think the real social justice work happens in trainings and conversations and analysis and problem solving. Okay, I think those are my tips and tricks. Let's go back. Does anyone have any questions about anything I said or thoughts? I'm gonna look at the chat. Oh, cool, there's the parable of downstreamers. Okay, great, that sounds much more appropriate. Yes, any questions? Where do you find the time in the school day? Yes, a very, 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 very good question. So this is my whole job. I teach one class, I have an advisory, I have 8 billion things going on, but I am allowed to focus exclusively on this. So that's definitely just like a thing that's lucky again. In terms of doing this work in the classroom, we've been able to embed it in various programs in the upper school. We have a couple classes. So like there's an AP computer science class that signed up for the AP for We credit, which is a certain designation. And they do a whole project. And so I'll then go into the computer science classes and I go into each section and I read the starfish story, which is actually something that I wrote in there. I don't think I talked about it yet, but the starfish story is another, it's a great sort of parable that you can problematize with the students in their like approach to creating a project. And it's essentially like a young man is walking down the beach. He sees all these starfish that have been beached. He's throwing them back in the water. The old man says to him, "Why are you doing that? There's a huge beach. You're never going to get all the starfish." And the man says, "But if I just affect one's life, like then I'll have done my job." And you say, like, what's good about that? And then the students say, well, you know, it's really important to do that. And the idea is that even if you just make a little bit of change, it makes a big difference. And I say, yes. And then I say, and what is complicated about this? And we talk about ecosystems and how the young man didn't know if the starfish actually, like, it's part of their day to be on the beach. That the story is totally apolitical. It doesn't talk at all about like a potential climate change related storm that'll like push the starfish up there. It implies that the communities that we're helping are helpless, and that our whole goal is to just go in and like save the starfish. So I have them sort of problematize that, and then they go into their projects. So that's one example of that. But yeah, the time piece, I hear you. It's like it's the biggest challenge, even in a program that's where I'm allowed to sort of do things like that. Any other questions or thoughts or experiences with this before we do the breakout? Okay. Cool. So what I want to do next is, I think we can put people in groups of like 4-ish, 5, somewhere around there. And I think you can do whatever works for you, but we're going to spend some real time in there. So pick a program you already run and think about, based on some of what I just shared, or again, I'm not an expert. I think a lot of you probably have great experience doing this. Whoa, sorry. What have you done, or how can you embed a social justice critical service learning framework into it? So pick a program that you already run and think like, how can I have a systems analysis, do the self-reflection rooted in partnership, and or pick one of these programs, which are things that I'm sure we all have like lots of different sort of variations of, and then build it out with a social justice approach. So either a middle school food drive, a 3rd grade nature center cleanup, or an upper school Red Cross club. So again, you can sort of choose your own adventure here. I would say if there's 4 of you in a breakout room, you should spend some time on each of these things, but workshop that. And if someone could take notes, and then we can just come back together after maybe, let's say, like 15 minutes. Perfect. So I will stop the share. I can put the questions in, I'll put the questions in a chat. And I think you'll be able to still see that. Okay. Cool. Hey,
Look at all these
everyone.
faces.
I felt like we needed more time.
Oh, that's good.
Always.
That is good. I know. Well, this could definitely be taken offline, and I'm always happy to, yeah, I'm happy to chat more, and I'm sure other folks are as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear out. Does a group is there one group that is excited to share some of what you came up with or ideas? For me, I was saying to Blake earlier that this group of people and these sort of sessions have been so wonderful for me in terms of just like hearing what everyone else is doing at their schools. I think just examples I find really helpful. So does anyone have anything that they want to share that they came up with or are already doing?
I'll share.
Great. Thanks.
My name is Zara Adams. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Germantown Friends School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I was just sharing with my group that I'm new to the role, and I think that's a good and a bad thing, especially in the midst of a pandemic, and that I can kind of reimagine the role, and come at it with a different spin as a new person in the role, not new to the school, but new to the role. We do a traditional food drive, but in having conversations, consistent conversations learned that there's an increased need for food in the community where our school is. And so we've changed our one-time food drive that would usually happen around Thanksgiving to an ongoing food drive.
Mm.
So this is going to happen once per month. Um, and so, the community is really excited about that. Many of our upper school clubs that would usually go out into the neighborhood to do things and volunteer, they're joining forces to help this ongoing food drive. Then, with our consistent conversations, we're learning exactly what items are needed for the food drive. So people aren't just, picking up anything off their shelf. They're providing the food that the missions are asking for. And that we're doing this as a collaborative effort, working with missions that are already distributing food. So we're partnering, with the missions in the neighborhood. So
Great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I like that idea of sort of making it consistent. I think that also allows for the partnership, but also the recognition that problems persist and we need to like figure out what to do next. So I think that's great. Thanks, Sarah. Someone else want to share?
Our group, hi, sorry, Sarah Fisher. I realized we weren't all necessarily all looking at the same page. Our group talked a lot about not only the programs that we are doing, food bank programs, or the kind of transition from going out and doing like a day of service and then what that looks like in COVID, but also a little bit about language and the language we're using. And so the idea of like not maybe using the word helping, but using the word partnership, acknowledging that there's a problem with the word service and either not using it and moving to community engagement or something, or having a deep conversation about what that service looks like. We had people who are in the ministry, a campus ministry as well. So, there's like the idea of like service within many religions. So if that's the base you're using, like, how do you talk about that? Or maybe thinking about public service or like service in the army or what have you, which is I think an interesting piece of that conversation and how that language matters. And at the end, we were talking a little bit about the kind of inherent problem of doing direct service work, which we want our kids to do, right? Because it helps them build empathy and right. But at the same time, especially in for example, in our case, we're in Newark Academy. We are not in Newark anymore. So when we go back to Newark, as we try to re-engage with the city, which is not the only place we do service, but disproportionately, what's happening is we're serving Black and brown communities disproportionately. That doesn't reflect our community necessarily. And so whether we name it, we have to name it and talk about it, because otherwise we're kind of even doing good. So we could be doing damage by like reinforcing that implicit bias of who needs the help. And Shelley and others talked a little bit about like power imbalance with service and how do we kind of deal with that, because it's there kind of regardless. So I hope I got that right, crew.
Getting some thumbs up, I'm seeing. Sarah, I think that's so important. Just the concept of if you're not talking about it, there are messages that are being internalized by students, no matter what. So naming things and discussing them feels so critical as part of this, especially I think when it comes to dynamics around race and class, especially at an independent school environment. But yeah, if you're not naming it, it's still happening, right? So I think that's really important. Another group?
I'll share. Katie Lake, who had to leave to go to advisory, was talking about her social justice fellows program at Hockaday. And one thing that she mentioned that I really appreciated was speaking with students about how to continue their engagement on a topic after the specific opportunity has concluded. Sorry, my name is Annie Harold. I work with Envoys, designing programs in partnership with schools. And yeah, this is something that we've been trying to do too. In our virtual programs this year, we have asked students at the end of each to create a 5-year plan, a theoretical plan for continuing their engagement and expanding the scope of their understanding and activism on issues. And whether or not they follow, we don't check in with them after 5 years, or that's not the plan, but just to have them start thinking about how they could do more. And then another thing I just wanted to share is a rubric that we use to evaluate service learning opportunities. This has been very beneficial when we're working with teachers, but also I think is a great tool for teachers to use with their students, just to open up those conversations before engaging in service learning. So if anyone would like to see that rubric, you can private message me your email address and I'll send that over. Thanks.
That'd be awesome, Annie. Thank you. That's great.
We talked about a couple of different things in our group, but I'm Debbie. I'm at the Dwight Englewood School, and I also partner a lot with our director of equity and diversity engagement. One of the things that we are working on together is also our Thanksgiving food drive, which is an annual part of our program here. But this year we are inviting members from our partner organizations to come and actually educate our student body and our staff about food insecurity as an issue in our county on a national level, but specifically our county. And then we're going to talk to the director of the food pantry that we most partner with to talk about the specific needs of our town of Englewood, New Jersey. Right, so we'll move from big picture root causes of food insecurity down to very specific, how can you help right now, but how can you help long term? So that's one of the formats that we're also using in collaboration or together with our food drive. So.
Nice. I think that's also a beautiful way to do this in like a COVID world. Because what I experienced, especially we're hybrid right now, but we were, of course, virtual in the spring. And we had, I'm close friends with one of the guys who runs the food pantry in our neighborhood. And he loves doing educational work with young people. And it's certainly not the case for every nonprofit worker, right? But he does. So I would say if you can find someone who's interested in doing that, he came into a big Zoom with our 8th graders who were running a like run-a-thon to raise money for this food pantry. So beforehand I had him come on and he led the group in like a brainstorming activity where he essentially said, we have this many people we need to serve. Here are the COVID restrictions. Here are the zip codes. What do we do? And then the students went into breakout rooms. There was obviously some more details there, but they came up with plans for how to like meet the community needs, how to meet the food delivery needs, how to do all of that before they actually did the like participatory part of the fundraiser. And it sounds like Debbie, you're moving in a similar way in terms of like kind of having the person come on a Zoom or to talk through what their experience is and how to make it a little humanize this scenario a little bit. Okay, I think, yeah, we're pretty much at time. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share quickly, or we're feeling good? Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much. I always learn a lot from the folks in this virtual space, so I appreciate that, what you all just shared. I'm happy to. I got someone asked if I could share my slides. I can send that to Blake after, and in that I can also include the links to the couple of articles that I cited, if that's helpful. Tanaya Mitchell is one that I think she's amazing and important to know for this work. So just digging into her research in general has also been really useful. But again, thank you all so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.